Hello and welcome to today's session on future-proofing mobile application development. My name is Mark Troester and I work for Progress Software, and we are pleased to have John Jackson, who is the Research Vice President, Mobile and Connected Platforms, who is going to walk us through the important trends of what he sees in the mobile marketplace today. And then I will follow that up with how those trends relate to what we do at Progress Software. So without further introduction, I'd like to turn it over to John Jackson from IDC.
All right, thank you very much. And good day to everybody on the call. And John Jackson here from IDC. I'm a researcher and analyst at IDC, and part of the remit that we'll be hearing about today from me involves coverage of application development, and that kind of traverses the consumer and enterprise domains. So I look at the way application services and utilities are being mobilized, managed, developed, coded, distributed, all that good stuff, and the underlying platforms and infrastructure that enable those processes. So with that, I'm going to speak first about kind of our views, IDC's views on the way things are going. So, and to do that, I'm going to feed back a bit of what you, the developer community, has told us, and that's going to come in the form of some super duper fresh survey data that we just returned as part of our annual, a large scale annual dev survey, enterprise dev survey that came back a couple weeks ago. So this will be nice fresh data. Hopefully it resonates with all of you. So with that, let's kind of move right into it. The theme today is future-proofing mobile application development, and so I'll kind of start at a high level, and then we'll sort of drill into it if you like. So to kind of set the stage, let's talk a little bit about things that we think are going to stay true, things that are going to be essentially constant. So I have sort of four relatively simple, straightforward bullet points here, and the first three, if you consider them, represent what I think of as sort of the two or three vectors of heterogeneity that we're going to deal with. So, and those relate to the number and nature of client-side environments, the nature of back-end connections that will need to be mobilized. So that's kind of two. And then the third one are the number and nature of constituents that you, the developers, will be facing who are demanding that various utilities, resources, applications, and services get mobilized. So starting from the beginning here, the rule of target target software platforms used to be the rule of 2.3-ish, right? So, we understand that in general, we're going to need to target Android. We're going to need to target iOS, and the 0.3 came from some agglomeration of Windows and BlackBerry and maybe something else. That number is going up. So you're now telling us that you're targeting a greater number of environments than you were just a year ago. So that number continues to kind of trend up. So perhaps this is one constant that we're dealing with, and I think if there's a prescription here, it is that the diversity, the heterogeneity, the opportunity for any kind of harmonization across the client side is not likely to happen, right? So we're dealing with permanent heterogeneity essentially when we're thinking about the number and nature of client-side environments that we're going to be writing to, coding for in the smartphone, tablet, and whatever else devices come along domains. This heterogeneity, this diversity, also exists and is amply evident, and we're going to kind of come on to what that means when we talk about your issues on the server side, the types of data formats where there's a requirement for mobilization. So, you have these, back-end server infrastructures and data formats, and there's this kind of perennial question: hey, do I try to mobilize this stuff that may or may not be optimized for mobilization, or do I kind of rip, replace, and start from scratch? And I think that there's a powerful case that you don't necessarily need to walk away from some of these sunk costs. And then finally, maybe a bit of more of a subjective assertion here. It is that it's interesting to kind of hear about mobile first, right? This idea that we need to think in a mobile first way. I'm not sure I necessarily subscribe to that, but I think it's fair to say that if you haven't experienced demand from virtually all quarters, it's right around the corner. So, your partners, your customers, your executives, your line of business employees, consumers that your enterprise may serve are going to demand the ability to interact with your apps and services and your business in a mobile fashion if they aren't already. So let's go, let's kind of do some stats. We'll walk through some numbers from our survey as promised here. As analysts, we should not be surprised. We shouldn't allow ourselves to be surprised. But so there's a bit of maybe a mea culpa, or I'll be vulnerable here for a second and tell you that I have been surprised by what is shown here, and I would characterize this as a relative lack of overall enterprise mobile maturity. Now, of course, if you pull this back a bit and if you parse it, enterprises are relatively more or less mature depending on, we observe, for example, the Fortune 500, 1,000 being relatively more mature in terms of the number of applications that they've mobilized to date and the types of applications that they're mobilizing than the mid-market or the small, medium business segment, which is, I think it's probably not a stretch to say at this stage, if you look broadly, radically under-mobilized. So essentially that you're telling us that you really have not mobilized too many applications. What we do see and what isn't represented here, and maybe we should have asked this question a little bit differently, but that sort of greater than 3 number, I'd be interested to understand how some of you see yourself benchmarked against what the survey responses I'm showing here say. As it relates to the development of custom enterprise applications, enterprises that have engaged in the development of custom applications are telling us that they have developed on average now greater than 12 or 13 custom mobile applications. So, the aggregate numbers are relatively small, but where there has been an investment in custom application development, there's been some fairly prolific development that has happened there. And when you develop, you are telling us, when we ask you that you develop, the answer is sort of the proverbial D, all of the above. In the consumer domain, of course, we have seen essentially the appification of everything. So any kind of resource, any kind of utility, any kind of application or service that you might want to access is generally accessible on your Android or your iOS or your Windows device. Maybe less true in some of the more recently emerging OS environments, but this is also true in the enterprise environment. So, you may not have mobilized too many applications just yet, but when we ask you, what you've mobilized to date, the answer is essentially everything. And I think this kind of points back to that, that issue of heterogeneity in terms of the number and nature of audiences that you can expect to serve over time. So, and in a sense, maybe this is a bit of a depiction of what will be obvious. Everything is going to be mobilized, and the reason for that, essentially, is because mobility is really a way of describing the way we're going to compute now and for the foreseeable future going forward. It's the way that consumers and business users are going to consume and interact with applications and services of all types and all stripes. With this, of course, comes fairly profound challenges that we're here to talk about today. So we're aware, and many of you, there's a sufficient number of you on the call today that I expect a lot of you may have optimized your mobility initiatives around a given platform. Maybe you're an iOS shop, or maybe you're a Windows shop or an Android shop, whatever it may be. But most of you are targeting the mainstream, all of the mainstream environments. Most of you are targeting or are considering most of the mainstream environments that exist out there. And of course, we can argue about whether Android is a singularly extant kind of thing or represents a number of different types of OS instantiations, and maybe that's even true across iOS and Windows Phone. What we see here, it's probably worth a bit of commentary on the relative trajectory of these OSs. So Android shows up in a way that it has increased year on year, and maybe this is not terribly surprising, but I would also say that I'm a little bit surprised at how prevalent it is in the enterprise environment as a target, given sort of what we understand to be true about some of the security risks that have existed on the platform. These, of course, are all addressable via any number of solutions that exist out there. This is quite good news if you think about the prospects of Windows Phone in the marketplace, and BlackBerry kind of hanging in there. It's decreasing, of course, as you would reasonably expect, but 33% of you are still targeting that platform. So maybe that's good news for BlackBerry as well, kind of hanging in there relative to its position in the broader market. And when we think of it, when we ask you, how you are targeting these platforms, I will say that we at IDC do some global developer census taking. So we hear anecdotally about shortages in talent as it relates to developers that are facile or native, iOS and native Android developers. So these folks apparently are harder and harder to come by. Maybe that mitigates itself over time, but when we look at, we think, for example, that there are about 420,000 native active facile iOS developers on the planet. Maybe about 100,000 less than that as it relates to native Android developers, and an order of magnitude, maybe 5, 6 or so million, active web language developers. Many of these web language developers, I think, are hopefully on the phone with us today, but a lot of you also live in enterprise IT departments, and there's an argument that says that you haven't yet had the requisite tool sets to kind of develop mobile applications. I think that becomes less and less true. And not surprisingly, what we see is a very sort of robust use of web languages when we're talking about developing enterprise applications. So this to me speaks to in-house resources effectively applying their talents to the mobilization of applications. And native year on year is decreasing as a component of enterprise web application development, kind of as it relates to coding preferences. So we see web technologies remaining quite prevalent, and then hybrid growing as well. And of course, hybrid we may talk about a little bit later in the conversation today, but that relates to developing some percentage of the code base using web languages and then using other means to access native API calls. So, not surprising, I think, to see that mix prevailing as it relates to enterprise application development. But overall, I think what this says is that there is a demand for rapid application development capability when we think about how we want to mobilize applications and utilities in the enterprise environment. So, we're applying the skill sets that we have. We increasingly have, or are going out and finding the resources and the platforms that are enabling us to kind of do this. And so the result should be, and its signs indicate that it is, a more sort of prolific and rapid fire way of developing and mobilizing enterprise applications. Now, with more prolific application development, of course, comes more risk. It is, there's a school of thought that says that, innovation is at some level the reflecting the ability to fail rapidly, as they say. So, great companies, great innovations come from the ability to kind of experiment in rapid fire fashion and bootstrap things in rapid fire fashion and, fail quickly and at low cost, if that's what that means. Our latest surveys, and we ask the survey respondents quite subjectively, what it means to fail, in essence. So the chart at the top on the right is one where we ask, in the last 12 to 18 months, what percentage of your applications have failed? And if you do a weighted average of the responses, it's about 29.9. So say 30% of you tell us that, or you tell us that 30% of the applications that you've developed in the last 12 to 18 months can be considered failures. So, that's interesting. Are you failing rapidly, or are you failing at some great cost? I suspect that the answer is biased toward the latter, given what we know about sort of the adoption of solutions that maybe let you develop applications in a more rapid-fire fashion. Today, it's not necessarily where it's going to be. So I think in general, developers don't yet have the ability to develop applications, and you don't have the ability to afford to fail at these rates. So this is maybe not quite good news. A similar percentage of you tell us that in the last 12 to 18, of the applications that have been developed in the last 12 to 18 months, 30 or so percent, when you do that weighted average, have already been replaced. So, this speaks, I think, to the relatively immature state of enterprise mobility, or the embrace of mobility within the enterprise. And it probably also speaks to a set of circumstances that maybe forestall a more strategic embrace of application mobilization in the enterprise. If you've been burned a bit, you may be a little bit more reticent about going back and asking for that incremental budget, and that may be a more difficult call to have. So we need to look for solutions that help us not fail at such a prolific rate. We also ask about, and not to kind of harp on the negative here, but we do ask about quote-unquote issues. Everybody has issues, and maybe in a anonymized survey, you would be more forthcoming about telling us what your issues precisely are. I highlighted, so security tops the list, and security tops almost every list, every time, year on year, when we ask about, what are your primary concerns? What are your primary concerns when you're deploying X, Y, and Z type functionality, or what are your primary concerns when you're selecting this type of solution or thinking about mobilizing things? It's always security, security, security. But not surprisingly, and I think this speaks to these vectors of heterogeneity that I talked about at the beginning of the presentation, and that I think Lee is going to show us ways of addressing. Linking mobile platforms to existing databases is a strong number two. Sometimes these things can take longer to deploy than we initially anticipate. I don't think that's unusual, but I've also highlighted in red the idea that I need to manage different versions between and across multiple OS instantiations and runtime instantiations and things like this. So, the issue of managing across this permanently fragmented, permanently heterogeneous client side and this kind of permanently heterogeneous or potentially permanently heterogeneous server side, number and nature of data formats, number and nature of API calls you're going to want to make to mobilize any manner of applications. It tends to be a permanent feature, and when we ask you about whether or not these are big deals, the answer is a pretty resounding and pretty obvious yes. So, to kind of draw it to a bit of a conclusion, and then I will turn the ball over to Lee for Progress's perspective and the demo that you have all been waiting for. I would say, at the risk of kind of putting myself out of a job as a mobile analyst, the statement, the theme is that mobility is not enough. And I wonder sometimes if mobility is even a thing. I have been an analyst in the mobile domain for about 13 years or so, and it used to be that you could quantify and point to something and say, oh, that is mobile. But, in more recent history, I think the idea of mobility has become a bit more opaque, right? So, mobility is not an industry. It's not necessarily a thing. It is a condition, and it's a condition that is increasingly prevalent, if not dominant. It may be the natural human condition. And so in this way, we are now enabled, and mobility is a primary design point, right? It's the thing that you have to account for when you're thinking about modernizing your infrastructure and when you're thinking about mobile, different types of applications and how you're going to adapt them for maximum effect going forward. And I would also say that, to the point that mobility is not enough, it is a multi-channel world, right? So we hear very consistently from you that it's all well and good to kind of mobilize applications, but let's not forget that these applications come from somewhere, and my ability to have visibility, business intelligence, or analytics needs to traverse both the mobile and the not-so-mobile domains. So I need visibility across all of these things. It's not just that the world is going mobile and that's the end of it. It is a sort of multi-channel, multi-view, omni-channel type world that we're moving into. We recognize that this is a horses for courses type scenario. So developers' requirements are always going to be case specific, right? They're always kind of going to vary. But if there are common threads that I think we can discern, it is that there will be, you can reasonably expect the need to reach readily and quickly with a good user experience and at low cost across multiple heterogeneous client-side environments. That relates to the OS instantiations that I referred to, but also diverse types of hardware. And as the Internet of Things emerges, you will want to appify that as well, depending on what your enterprise does. So expect that is going to be a constant, and also the back-end integration challenge. This is not necessarily rip and replace. We're not going to walk away from all these sunk costs. We're going to want to use these, and there are solutions available today that let us do that. So I think that's quite good news, and we're about to hear a little bit more about how we can do that and what that means sort of in practice and what it looks like. And so finally, the good news is that I think in terms of selecting or looking at solutions or partners that can help you manage these challenges, they're broadly available today. I would say, by way of sort of cautioning the buyer, or as a cautionary way of kind of introducing the idea of vendor selection, vendor evaluation, lots of companies come from lots of different genealogies, if you like. So I think it's important to be able to sort of map what you tell us the real challenges are, what are the issues, what are the requirements, and then what is the sort of heritage of the solution vendor set that you're evaluating that's going to help you manage through those challenges. So with that, I would say choose cautiously. Maybe that's a statement of the obvious, but I would also say, look, there are no shortage of solution vendors out there. Think about where they come from, what they've historically been good at, and what the holistic and modular set of capabilities that they bring to the table are. So thank you very much for that, and I am kind of at the end of my time here. Thank you.
Thank you, John, for that overview of what's happening with the mobile application space. What I'd like to do is kind of touch on some of the points that you've made and tie that into our product direction and what we do at Progress Software. I felt it was really important and interesting to hear you talk about vectors of heterogeneity. You talked about mobile client diversity, back-end data format diversity, as well as the need to support a wide variety of service and application breadth. These points are very important in terms of how we see the market as well, because it's just a fact that people use a wide variety of clients. It's not just mobile, it's mobile and it is iPads. It's not just Apple, it's Apple and Android. And so we have moved to the point where we allow people to use a hybrid approach to create compelling applications that support multiple clients. But the key is to do that without custom code, because the customers that we sell to just don't have the resources available to sit and write custom code for every different environment. Likewise, the organizations that we interact with have a wide variety of back-end data formats as well as applications. They need to be able to connect to those things not only from a web-based application but also from a mobile application. So you'll hear us talk about what we do in terms of cloud connectivity as well as web service style integration with those applications and data sources as well. And finally, the need, as John talked about, to provide support for a wide variety of applications really drives the need to build applications very quickly. And that's really what we're about in terms of what we do with Progress Pacific. Our role-based application development capability allows you to build an applications based on a model, which we refer to as model-driven, and then you can take that and mobilize those applications very quickly. So it allows you to be able to meet the needs of your users very quickly. The other thing that I think is important is you kind of talked about the different things in the survey that are important to your users or issues that people have with mobile deployments. And so I'd like to take a little bit of time to kind of talk about that and tie that to what we do with Progress Pacific. So first of all, I think the number one thing that was an issue was security and compliance issues. What we see at the Progress level is that we help with that because we provide a multi-tenancy model that allows you to segment your data appropriately. We allow you to manage users so that you can define what users can do what with each application. And then finally, we provide the option to do a private cloud deployment so that if you are concerned about running data or having your application in the public cloud, you can run it in the private cloud. Those are things that will help you overcome security and compliance issues. We already talked about the issue about being able to link mobile platforms into the database, and I talked about how we provide Pacific cloud-based connectivity as well as REST-style interface, so we have complete capabilities in terms of being able to integrate with those data sources. There's a lot that comes up in the survey about being able to deploy applications faster. So the issue is that it took longer for applications to be deployed. Well, Rollbase allows you to rapidly build applications, and applications are automatically deployed. That also ties into another concern that they've expressed in terms of cost overruns and budget issues. Again, that rapid application development capability, as well as being able to expose development capabilities to the citizen developer so that you can have business or technical business users involved in the development process will help you with those cost overruns and budget issues. And then finally, the concern about it's too complicated to install, manage, and support the applications is addressed by our ability to support your applications and your mobile applications in the public cloud. If you have the public cloud, you really don't need to manage the installation of the applications. You don't need to manage the implementation of the infrastructure. That's all taken care of you by us. And then finally, those applications are automatically deployed. So it just really reduces the time that it takes for you guys to install, manage, and support those applications. So let's introduce Progress Pacific. It is a platform as a service that makes it easy for you guys to build applications and to integrate data. That is the foundation for what we do with Rollbase, and mobile is a key part of that application capability. So with Progress Pacific, you can not only build applications, but you can integrate data. And we see those as inextricably linked because when you build applications, you're building those on top of data sources. So back to that way of being able to easily integrate data into those applications is key. Progress Rollbase is the application development capability that is based on the Pacific platform, and we have a service-based approach that allows us to easily provide those capabilities to Rollbase. And then I mentioned this already, but what's really important is the need or the support that we provide not only for a public cloud implementation, but for on-premise and private cloud implementation as well. We obviously see mobile as a key part of Progress Pacific. And now I'm going to spend a little bit of time introducing Progress Rollbase or RoleBased Mobile. So first of all, we see the need to be able to help customers to deliver and develop exceptional applications very quickly for mobile devices such as phones and for iPads as well. So what we provide is a complete development environment, which is what we refer to as Rollbase. And within that single role-based development environment, you can build both web applications and mobile applications. So we have a application builder that allows you to build the mobile applications. We tie all that back together with business logic through a capability that we refer to as JavaScript Data Object. I'm not going to go into a lot of technical depth today because we have additional sessions that are going to talk about how we do this with a demo session, and there's a lot more information out there about the technical aspect of this. But the key takeaway here is that it's a single development environment that's cloud-based that allows you to deploy and develop and run these applications in the cloud, and we have the right infrastructure in terms of the back-end services to make that happen very easily. basically what you do is you start at the Pacific console and you say, hey, I'd like to build I'd like to build a mobile application. So you go into RoleBased Mobile, you see a screenshot there of how you can actually see the mobile environment directly within the development environment. And after you've created the application, which we allow you to build model-driven business objects to support that application, you can then deploy it on a mobile application store such as what Google and Apple supports. And then we have the appropriate back-end services that support the ability to easily tie the mobile GUI to back-end services such as a business entity so that you can create, read, update, and delete everything that relates to that application. We also provide the ability of a back-end service to actually do alerts as well. So that's another key to what we provide in terms of what we do with our solution. So we've extended the capabilities of Rollbase to include a fully integrated development environment for both web and mobile. It is based on cloud-based attributes, so you can completely deploy your applications in the cloud. We take an approach where we provide deployment or development flexibility. I introduced the fact that, many organizations don't have the resources available to build native applications. They want a native experience, and we provide that via what we refer to as a hybrid approach that uses a container-based approach that allows you to leverage the individual capabilities of each device, such as calendar or contact or phone, camera, and using the camera and stuff like that, you can build very compelling applications. That is all founded on this model-driven approach so that, when you build a mobile application, you still need a back-end application service to support that. We're a big proponent of thinking about building both web and mobile together, so you can build your model-driven approach that will define your business entities and then hook that up both to a web application as well as a mobile application. And then finally, the ability to do push notifications and to integrate those mobile applications into a broad range of back-end data sources. So to summarize, what we provide is really a best-in-class mobile development environment. We make it easy to assemble, manage, and deploy enterprise-class mobile applications. Those could be standalone mobile applications, or you could develop a joint web and mobile application so that you may have some capabilities that are appropriate for someone who's using a desktop application, but then you expose some of those capabilities to a mobile client if you've got somebody in the field or who needs access outside of work, or if you need access to customers and to provide that capability to them. We do that via a single platform for both web and mobile, and we allow you to leverage the economic benefits of the cloud. So instead of having to spin up your own infrastructure to do all of that on your own, to come up with the data center servers and everything that you need to do that, we do that in the cloud, which is another way that we help you simplify development and deployment efforts. So hopefully you gained some knowledge from IDC's presentation about what's happening in the mobile, and you see how that we tie that back to Progress Pacific. And hopefully you can join us for additional sessions as we move forward with our webinar series. Thank you for attending today.